and welcome to LibertyNation.com's content videos. I'm Lisa K. Donner, Editor-in-Chief of Liberty Nation, and joining me today is Legal Affairs Editor Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire. We are going to discuss the proposal by the Parkland students to limit gun rights. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Lisa.
Well, David Hogue's crusade against private gun ownership took on new meaning today as the anti-gun group March for Our Lives issued what they called a peace plan for a safer America. Essentially, it's a roadmap to seeing people disarmed, and if enacted, the only people who are likely to own firearms legally are the U.S. government agencies and wealthy collectors. What anti-gun goodies does Mr. Hogue have in store for us, Scott?
It's hard to know where to start, Lisa. It is a profoundly comprehensive plan to attack not just firearm rights, but firearm ownership in the United States. I'll run down some highlights. You can stop me when you're tired of hearing about it. Number one, each person who wishes to legally own a firearm in the United States must undergo training that is, I think, would be analogous to what a police officer goes through. Perhaps not in its entirety of the duration, but annual practical training in order to maintain a license to keep and bear arms.
Okay, wait, stop. This is just regular folks.
If you wish to own a gun, Lisa, you are going to have to take classes in order to get a special license to own that gun, and then you're going to have to take additional classes every single year in order to maintain that license under this proposal.
Whoa, okay.
That's why I say that the only people who will own guns after this are wealthy collectors, because they'll have the passion to put in the time and the money to do so. These classes aren't going to be free. You're going to have to pay to exercise your right. But of course, that's the hook there. It's not going to be a right anymore, and that's why you'll have to pay to exercise it. It's going to be something else.
So is this kind of like a driver's license times 10? In other words, the driver's license expires every 6 years and you have to retake, but this essentially expires every 1 year. Is it sort of like making everybody a concealed carry person?
Except that it's much more onerous than even that, Lisa. It is, I mean, it's just designed to crush the will to legally own firearms. And then let's get to point two, which is what firearms can you legally own if you jump through all those hoops? Not many. The definition of assault, they don't go into a legalistic definition, but the broad stroke definition that they say, and let me just actually back up 1 second. So this package includes a complete ban on what they call assault rifles. What that means is, practically speaking, any semi-automatic rifle is what we're talking about will be completely banned. Let me go on before you comment on that. And there will also be a taxpayer-funded, quote-unquote, buyback of every privately funded firearm. So just to clarify, what this proposal means is there will be a giant pool of money allocated for any American who has a firearm and wishes to turn it in, to sell it basically to the government for destruction. That's another component of the plan. So you'll basically be limited to handguns and some 22 caliber long arms and maybe shotguns. I'm not sure if they tried to ban shotguns in this yet. I'll have to do some more reading in the footnotes, perhaps.
Well, while on vacation last week, I had a conversation with my lovely goddaughter, and she mentioned magazines. I think young folks today are really paranoid about, why does somebody need to have a 100-round magazine, et cetera. What's your answer to that, Scott? And what does Hogue suggest as a remedy?
Yeah, well, they're going to be banned, and any magazines over 10 rounds will be banned under this proposal. That's part of the quote-unquote assault weapons ban. It includes a magazine ban, and it just happens to be something that has been successfully demonized. Why would anybody need two typewriters in terms of a First Amendment analysis? Isn't one enough to get if it's a fundamental right, Lisa, all these things come back to one question. If we agree or disagree that it's a fundamental right, if it is, that is to say, to keep and bear arms, a fundamental right, then so many of these other questions fall by the wayside. If it's not, then we can argue about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. And that's where the Everytown Hog March for Our Lives crew is. But
wait a second, Scott. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, because I think if we can answer that question for young people, we may take a little fire out of their belly.
There's no indication, Lisa, that high-capacity magazines are a significant aid in these massacres. Or, in fact, I just bought into some of the gun grabbers' language. It's full-capacity magazines, really. It's not like these are somehow outsized, crazy. The 100-round capacity magazine that you mentioned in your question earlier, those things are not used for these types of crimes typically because they're generally unreliable. Those sort of outlier giant magazines. It's just not something that's likely to reduce any incidents of violence. There's basically just no need for it except for the fact that it has been successfully demonized. Practically, there will be no safety benefit.
Okay, the media has taken to calling certain guns military-style assault weapons. What are they talking about, and what does Hogue have to say about it in his proposal?
Well, military, so the style is the operative word there, which is to say they resemble often in color and shape military weapons. And that is about where the similarities end. What they've tried to do here, Lisa, is to marry the notion that these gun bans have something to do with an actual machine gun. And sadly, I have to say, it is just blatant dishonesty and lies. I spoke with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas first responder and Coral Springs police officer and police trainer Scott Mitchell today about this very issue, Lisa, and he basically says that it's totally disingenuous. This is a person who works with what are basically civilian firearms and knows a great deal about firearms, including the military, the actual military select fire guns. So what they do is they show some footage of somebody who basically depresses a trigger and bullets spray like a machine gun does, and then they talk about assault weapons. And the idea is that we should think that that's what assault weapons are. In reality, it's just a made-up term. It's about a black gun that has the shape of the same gun that they take, in the military. And it's really sad. Pete Buttigieg actually is one of the leaders of the pack here. We're talking about nobody should have the same gun that he carried. I think it was in Afghanistan or Iraq. And he knows that that's not the guns that are legal for sale in America, except for people who want to go through, you want to talk about an onerous check. You can buy a machine gun in America if you're willing to spend about $10,000 and wait a year. That's sort of how the legal, hoops go. These are not gangbangers and students who are massacring people who own machine guns. It's rich people who are interested, or at least people who are willing to devote 5 figures to a single firearm. That's a pretty small universe, and they're typically not going and shooting up schools. So it's a non-issue, but it's convenient to demonize and then use that demonization to take away the guns that Americans commonly do own, which are semi-automatic.
What I'm hearing you weave into some of your commentary is that this is a proposal that'll make guns for rich people only. In other words, it'll take the availability of guns out of people who are maybe middle class or lower class, or don't have the kind of funds to.
Well, Lisa, there's another component of this, and another component is Part 3: accountability for the gun lobby and industry from the March for Our Lives plan. And what that includes is ripping away the civil protection that firearm manufacturers have from laws that allow. Basically what happens is somebody holds up a liquor store and shoots the clerk, right? So the clerk's family says, oh, well, I can't go after the piece of trash who murdered my kin because they don't have any money. That's why they were robbing the store in the first place. But what I can do is I can go after Smith & Wesson because they've got lots of money. And meanwhile, Smith & Wesson says, we sold this guy a legal, we didn't even sell it to him, actually. We sold it to a distributor. We have nothing to do with this. But sympathetic juries and anti-gun, basically people, will go ahead and basically give these people money. And so there's a federal law that prevents that. As long as the firearm manufacturing company didn't do anything illegal, they can't be held civilly liable for a death. This would strip that protection away. It's one of the many. So you take away the guns that are legally held, you prevent new guns from entering the supply. That drives prices way up, and also making whole classes of guns illegal. That's how I get to the only rich collectors are going to be, maybe we can take away rich, but at least people with some money who are willing to allocate significant amounts of their resources to maintaining, gun ownership. and the time.
Maybe what Hogue and his people are after really is to take the gun companies and put them out of business.
Certainly, yes.
All right, what else is in the plan, Scott?
Okay, here's by the way, it's so hilarious. Then they shift away from actual guns, like the physical guns. They they want a thing they call the Safety Corps, and it's actually modeled on the Peace Corps. Now, hear me out here. It's a bit wacky, right? I mean, well, more than a bit wacky. It's crazy wacky, but you have to kind of parse through it. This Safety Corps that for gun violence prevention will hire many thousands of Americans from 16 to 25, provide them all with a living wage to go work in communities that are affected with gun violence. That's part of the plan, along with, Lisa.
What exactly are they going to do, Scott? They're not going to come armed to protect anyone.
What they're going to do is, what would you do if you were 19 years old and weren't in college and the government was paying you $40,000 a year to go ahead and help out? I mean, it's a taxpayer funded, here you go, to young people who are on board with our political plan. It's just a giveaway of taxpayer money to young people for, what do you think the average 16-year-old is going to be able to do if you send them to Baltimore, West Philadelphia, Anacostia, D.C. to combat gun violence? Exactly right. I see you shaking your head. They're going to get, if they actually try to intervene, they're probably going to get violently hurt. It's not about tweeting out if you're actually in one of these communities. Here's another provision of the plan, Lisa. Automatic voter registration. So you don't even have to now actually go and register to vote. All you do is live, and somehow the government just registers you and sends you the form that says, okay, here you go. You're registered now. And then, of course, then you...
Yeah, this is really crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's a progressive and statist plus Democrat wish list.
Right, pie in the sky.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, wait, excuse me. There's one other provision, which is that we should, and they don't state it quite this directly, but it is what it is. They want to eliminate the Second Amendment. That's the other thing. Repeal the Second Amendment. It's part of another part of the the provisions. So
I almost don't know where to go with this, Scott.
That one actually is honest, meaning removing revising the Second Amendment. I can actually respect somebody who says that's the only way we can get these things through. But obviously, all those provisions, Lisa, seem to me in my analysis to be in direct contravention to a fundamental right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, well, we knew it was going to be under fire with all the shootings, and Second Amendment supporters are really having to stand their ground now. And the hope is that President Trump will stand his ground. I know that you've expressed on the Uprising podcast several times your vociferous differentiation with his position on,
He has indicated a willingness to kind of do some business with those folks previous to this week, though. I will say the very most recent communications I've seen out of the White House indicate that he may have had a come to Jesus moment with some NRA folks or some people who are indicating where the votes are going to be. If I may be so bold as to suggest it's more about retail politics for him than ideology, and hopefully I think the tide is turning there from the White House to be more defensive of Second Amendment rights.
Well, apparently he did have a phone conversation with Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association, and for Second Amendment supporters, that's from LaPierre's ears, mouth to God's ears. One can only hope. But anyway, thank you so much, Scott. When are we going to the range again?
Soon, before we lose the right to do so.
Yeah, I know it's very worrisome. This is Scott DeCosenza, our legal affairs editor at LibertyNation.com. Read Scott's fine articles on LN. Also, like and subscribe. Just push the button down in the corner there and hit LibertyNation.com early and often. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief. We hope we've provided you with more light than heat today. Have a great day.